We're joined now by our business reporter, Kapano Gumbi.
Thanks, Stephen. The B-BBEE Commission released its report on the national status and trends on empowerment of last year. The report reveals an overall decline in black ownership, a worrying trend. But joining us now to unpack this is Lindiwe Madonsela from the B-BBEE Commission. Lindiwe, thank you so much for your time. Let's start right there. Overall, in the last year, you've seen a decline in black ownership. If we unpack that, how do we understand this development?
Okay. Well, afternoon, Kopano, and thank you for having us. I think the first important thing for us to understand is to have that particular understanding that when we talk about ownership, what is it that you are referring to? Now, the ownership element, you find it under the Codes of Good Practice, and it says that when we measure three aspects of it. We measure the accessible voting rights in the hands of black people. We measure the economic interest that will flow based on the equity that is held by black people. At the same time, the third component will measure net value realization, which looks at the loan that is attached to that particular acquisition and how that loan needs to be repaid. Now, at the same time, the Codes of Good Practice, particularly the general codes, have set a minimum target of 25% plus one vote. Now, when we measure this as the B-BBEE Commission, based on the compliance reports, we look at the percentages of ownership that is coming through, particularly from the reports that we receive from JSE-listed entities, because the other reports from the public sector would not necessarily have the ownership element. Now, when we look at that ownership, and then also when we do the other function of the Commission, where we look at unpacking the various ownership transactions, we then get to understand what is the percentage of accessible voting rights and so forth. So this is how we collectively come up with the statistics that we just recently issued.
So as you say, the measure is 25 plus 1. Right now that number is sitting at around 29%. So it is above what you would require or suggest, recall, I should say, the minimum standard. It is above that minimum standard of the 25 plus 1. But this number, this 29, 30, it has not really changed significantly over the last decade. How do we understand that?
Okay. So maybe just before we get into the second part of the question, just to clarify, the 29.5% is an average based on the information that we've received. Remember, we've received 130 reports from JSE-listed entities. So out of those reports, on average, the black ownership is sitting at 29.5%, which is a decline from the 31% that we had from the 2020 report. It does not mean that the target is being achieved. It is an average that we have noted based on the percentages that have come through. So the ownership percentages will then vary. You can have a company that has 10%, which is less than the 25% plus one vote. Now, coming then to the second part around the fact that we have seen the ownership declining, it means that as the country, we still have black people who, when you look at the statistics, who are basically comprising above 92% of the South African population, still owning less than the South African economy. It simply means that we still have black people who still are not able to participate effectively in the mainstream economy through the ownership of the productive asset of the South African economy. Basically, that's what it means when we talk about this particular percentage of 29.5%.
The B-BBEE Commission, in that regard, do have some power to change that or to at least enforce a little bit more on companies that they take transformation seriously. Why have you not had as significant progress as well in changing this current data?
Okay. In terms of the work that we do, it's not probably the point that we have not made significant progress. I think we need to understand the different activities of the B-BBEE Commission. Firstly, remember that we come from an era that there was no regulator. The regulator has been in existence for a period of 5 years. And this particular work that we've conducted in terms of releasing the national report, we also issue it on an annual basis. Now, secondly, what we also need to understand is that we still have the challenge of fronting, which we see with the complaints that are coming through to the B-BBEE Commission. but also we see it through the tip-offs that are reported to the B-BBEE Commission, which tells us that we still have structures or transactions that are reflecting that black people are participating there, but in fact they are not. Hence why we actively and proactively, or even reacting to the tip-offs, investigating those aspects. So that is one area that the Commission is doing to make sure that we address that where black people are said to own, that ownership is real. Secondly, as the B-BBEE Commission, we've noted that a whole number of entities are not reporting. So when you look at the number that reported, when we talk about ownership, vis-a-vis the number of entities that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, it is not a full representation of those particular entities. Now, as the B-BBEE Commission, to change that so that the data that we receive, it is the full data so that we can give an accurate picture. We've identified companies that have failed to report, and we've started to issue notices of investigation against those entities that have failed to report. Now we've started to see an improvement, some of those entities reporting to remedy the non-compliance. And then the third other part, when we talk about ownership, it is the registration of ownership transactions with the value of 25 million and above. Those are the transactions that have to be registered with the B-BBEE Commission. Even on that part, we do issue an annual report that just focuses on ownership. Now, that report, when you issue it, it will look at cumulatively the transaction that we've received. But each individual transaction that is registered gets to be assessed. Then the parties will be communicated with the concerns to those particular transactions. And some parties do remedy and align the transaction so that the true ownership is actually derived by black people. We do have instances where parties fail to remedy, and those particular transactions, according to the processes, will be referred for investigation. So that is the work that currently the B-BBEE Commission is conducting to make sure that the ownership, as per the legislation, is the true ownership and a true reflection.
Lindiwe, I wonder how we can reconcile these two things. Just last week, the Banking Association also released their report on transformation, and they're showing an increase in black ownership, in fact, especially on JSE-listed companies. And what they found, what their research reveals at least, is that there have been a healthy number of transactions where black owners, previously disadvantaged, now black owners, might have sold out their shares, but an equal number or an even greater number are starting to buy back into that. But your data at least reveals something slightly different. How do we balance those two views?
Okay, we need to look at the fact that when you look at the Banking Association, they will probably focus their report in relation to the financial sector. Now, in terms of the B-BBEE legislation, currently we've got around 11 codes of good practice. We've got the general codes, and we've got a whole number of sector codes, which will include the financial sector code. Now, when you look at the report of the B-BBEE Commission, the report of the B-BBEE Commission is reporting based on all these particular sectors and possibly where we have received the reports. So we are not just isolating one sector. We are giving you a picture based on how companies are performing against the general codes and also against the other sector codes, which will include the financial sector code. So that is where you might find that the picture is different. But however, I still want to draw you to your attention to the fact that the Financial Sector Transformation Council, which is the council that is responsible for overseeing the financial sector code according to the B-BBEE legislation, they have also recently issued a report of the 2017-18 and 18-19 reports. Now, when you look at that report, it does also again confirm the statistics that are in the National Status Report of the B-BBEE Commission that we are still lacking when it comes to achieving transformation, and particularly in that particular sector. So it's quite important that when you compare this, we look at even the source of data that has been used, and we also look at what sectors are covered by these particular different reports so that we can be able to understand why is it that there could be differences in certain instances.
Lindiwe, lastly, I'm curious if, as the Commission, you guys have a view on why there's still so much resistance to transforming in our economy.
Okay. So the views, they vary, and the reason for why those views vary, there's a whole number of reasons why. Firstly, we pick up that sometimes the views vary because there's still lack of understanding in terms of what ownership is about. And we've picked that up when we conduct investigation where there's complaints around the element of ownership. And we've also picked that up when it comes to the major transactions that we assess. And then also we pick that up in terms of the advisory opinion that the companies would request, which relates to the ownership element. And then secondly, we do also find that there's a resistance based on the fact that there are entities who still simply are not willing to transform. Now, remember, all the activities of the Commission will then empower us to know exactly what is it that we need to do. Hence why we would use our investigation and enforcement mandate to make sure that the entities that have blatantly violated the B-BBEE legislation, in particular the ownership element, are held to account. So that is what the B-BBEE Commission is doing to make sure that we address the issue around non-compliance.
Okay. Lindiwe, Madonsela, thank you for your time from the B-BBEE Commission there.